Why have you got two sets of notes?
Because I made notes of things that I want to say about the stuff we're going to be talking about that was just ordered in the order I thought of them. And now there's actual show notes with an order that I want to try and stick to, but most of the important stuff is on the notes that I wrote in my own order, and I'm not changing them.
I want to address the state of the world.
Oh, yeah, let's do it. It's kind of like when we spoke about Australia was on fire, but now it feels like most of the world is on fire.
Oh, my
Partly
goodness.
literally and partly figuratively.
My goodness me. I don't think we're going to talk about this for a great deal of time. We're, not qualified to. But yeah, the world is in a weird place in many respects. The pandemic is one thing, but there is growing unrest in many parts of the world around injustice due to racism. It's awful to see. I wish we lived in a world where everyone was given equal opportunity to everything, and I think it's rubbish that we don't live in that world. I don't really know what else to say. It's a stressful time. Like, I find it so hard, like, being online at the moment. I have the great privilege of being able to ignore it in so many ways, and being able to be like, I don't want to hear about racism at the moment, and turning it off. But for many people, it's not something that you can do because it's racism directed at them, and they can't just turn that off. And so I'm trying to not exercise that privilege as much, to try and actually engage, well, not engage with, but like be more aware of that, and try to make myself see it more in the world. And that's hard for a lot of reasons. And I'm sorry. I wish we didn't live in this world.
Something that really struck me last night as I was just casually browsing through Reddit, which is a bad thing to do in the first place. Don't do that if you want a good view of the world. The thing that really... I'm reluctant to say like a moment of clarity, but certainly the realisation that we have a big movement happening right now, and that is meaning there are a lot of eyes on a lot of awful things that are happening. That doesn't mean they weren't happening when there weren't eyes on them. And it just makes you question, again, because it's not a part of our lives. It's like, what have we missed? What is going on that we don't even know about? And the answer is probably a fuck of a lot. A disgusting amount of bad stuff. And like you say, the temptation is to bury your head in the sand.
Well, I'll be honest, like, there's more, like, a lot of the time I do. Like,
see, this is the thing. The temptation is to bury your head in the sand, but then you realise that you're not burying it because it's already there. You're just putting it deeper.
Yeah.
When actually the only reasonable choice to make is to do the opposite and pull it out. And I don't know how to do that. And I guess all that we can do as voices who basically aren't involved is try and amplify those that are. And I don't really know how to do that either.
I think the thing for me that I've been trying to do is like I said, is be more aware, is start listening. I think that's a really powerful thing, is just to start listening, not engaging, not trying to put my opinion out into the world. He says putting his opinion out into the world.
It's like anything we say in this is going to be ironic in that sense.
Yeah,
just got to accept it.
So sort of like to see those stories that people put online, and read them and just read them, and you don't have to reply to the tweet, you don't have to retweet it, engage with it in any way. There is value in spreading these stories, but like you don't have to. And I think there is a lot of value in just being aware of it, and then as the inputs to your life change, your behaviour will change with it, I think. So that's one thing, is just to be more aware of it, more open to hearing those things. And then the other is to be more willing to stand up to it and see it, and sort of see the more, this is where that like I said, following on from being more open to it, seeing the more subtle forms of injustice. I think one of the things that I've sort of realised a bit recently, and it's sort of being said quite a lot, is that the racism, especially in America, is really obvious. It's very physical and hard to not, it's very visual. But like the racism that exists in the UK can be, and often is, a lot more subtle and a lot more insidious. And trying to have the bravery to stand up to it when you see it, and just to see it in the first place. Challenge your employer. Why are all the people who work here, why do they all look the same? What are you doing about that? And stuff like that. I think it's really hard to do, but something that needs to be done. I think I think I might have said this before. I don't know if I said it on Spinnerproof or not. There's a really fascinating like online demo thing by Vi Hart, and she worked with someone else. I forget who it was, but they put together this like interactive online demo for this kind of stuff, and it's a website with squares and triangles, and it's about if you it doesn't take many people so it's like you've got these populations of squares and triangles and what it takes to make those populations happy. And it doesn't take a great number of the triangles to be like, I'm only happy if there are no squares around, to result in a very segregated population. And then if you have a segregated population and then you make it so that the squares and the triangles don't differentiate themselves anymore, that doesn't automatically make it a diverse population again. It just stays the same. In order to sort of get everything to mix up again, you need to actively take steps towards that, which is something that to be perfectly frank, I didn't agree with before I saw this thing and before I sort of really sort of thought about it. But I think it makes a lot of sense, where it's like you need to actively step towards a more diverse world to get there. It will not happen by itself. Even if you could click your fingers and all of a sudden everyone in the world was not racist, was not sexist, was not any of these things, if they all just saw each other as equals, it would not make the world it wouldn't change like the distribution of population in terms of housing. It wouldn't particularly change the distribution of people in terms of the jobs they have and stuff like that. It would just become a steady state. In order to sort of like get towards the world that I think many of us want to live in, where it is a diverse place to be, you need to take steps towards it. And I think I'm going to find a link and I'm going to put that in the show notes because it's worth playing with.
I was going to say, I feel like we need something for the show notes here, if that makes sense. Some sort of takeaway. So thank you for providing that in a way that I definitely couldn't.
Do you have anything else to say?
On that, shamefully no.
No.
I would damn well like to.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to, with some degree of shame, exercise our privilege to move on from this topic and talk about slightly more cheerful things for a bit.
How we're going to do that, we don't quite know yet. We are a rudderless ship without the crutch of RTNCTI, aren't we?
I mean, I will allow us to explain to the people, this isn't going to be an episode of RTNCTI. We're going to talk about other stuff.
We've kind of had things that we wanted to do as after shows for a while, and then RTNCTI always kind of takes over, and certainly makes me lose the will to live by the end of an episode, and therefore after shows don't get done. So this is a show of after shows, essentially, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. All the stuff that we'd normally put after after I do my outro spiel is going to be here for everyone to enjoy.
I wonder how many people don't know the after shows exist, because the 3 or 4 second gap is enough for them to turn us off.
My expectation is that people hear me utter the phrase, "You can find the show notes," and then just immediately close the tab.
But then they'll never know what to not tweet us.
Which is why no one ever tweets us the thing.
Hey, people have tweeted us the thing at least like 3 times.
Yeah, but people genuinely don't because they just close the player immediately as soon as they hear me say that phrase. Look, I'm gonna halve the viewing numbers on YouTube right now. Ready? You can find the show notes for this episode. Oh, show's over. Close.
That is genuinely a thing, by the way, that I learned the hard way while managing a YouTube channel for a football club. Which is that I spent ages going through all our videos and adding end cards, thinking, there might be a bit of click-through from that, we'll get a few more views out of it. I think over about 30 videos, one of those end cards got clicked about twice. Because no one, it's like, it's highlights of a football match, they hear the final whistle and they're gone. Yep. I don't even know why I bothered making full-time graphics, because no one was seeing them.
Oh dear.
Which is why... it kind of makes sense, as annoying as it is, that every sponsored message on a YouTube video is now at like the 1 minute mark. Although I do aggressively skip them. And I really hope that enough people do the same and all of these creators can see the dip in retention at that point.
I'm sure they can, but the thing is, no matter where you put it, people are going to do it. It's going to cause that dip.
There are some good sponsor integrations out there. Although, funnily enough, the people I appreciate most... I don't know how many people do this. There's one person I do. I don't know if it's a channel you know of. Alex French Guy Cooking, it used to be called. Now I think it's just Alex, because he's made a brand now. And he has like a little progress bar for the sponsor message, which is such a lovely thing to do to help people skip it, but also makes me skip it more. So I feel like I should be rewarding him for his honesty. But actually, I'm just punishing it by skipping it more effectively.
Yeah, I've seen that as well on the... Corridor Crew channel. They have a little timer in the top right when there's an ad, and yeah, I just skip over it.
That's why I ended up watching some Corridor Crew videos, because I was on the Spinnerproof account, of course.
Oh dear, so good. Love those guys.
YouTube is a completely different place when you're on a different account. It is crazy the difference in stuff you actually get to see.
Yeah.
And what I find really upsetting is that my YouTube account never recommends me Spinnerproof content. And it's like, surely, if anybody should be getting fed that stuff, it's the guy that made it. And I'm guessing this won't happen to you because you probably don't look at YouTube recommendations anyway, which is why I'm not including you in this part of the conversation.
I tend not to look at the recommendations, no. I stick to my subscription list.
I might not actually be subscribed to Spinnerproof, I've just realised.
I mean, I know that I'm not. I was briefly, and then I unsubscribed.
You are part of the problem, sir. You haven't even rung that bell. I mean, come on.
Well, I was subscribed, and it was quite funny because every now and then I'd see you make a video public that used to be unlisted and thought that was quite funny. But with the I unsubscribed after we put an episode up because I kept checking the comments and that just made me sad. So I stopped and I unsubscribed to make it so I was less likely to see it.
And it turns out that was completely unnecessary because YouTube doesn't want us to see it anyway.
That's because no one listens on YouTube. There are no views on that video. The retention is like 13 minutes or something.
I'd like to think that's a bunch of people who'd never heard the podcast before, went, hey, this is good. I'm going to listen to it in a better way.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can persuade the YouTube gang to step up their game a bit, okay? Right, so you're competing against the other analytics that we have is the stuff from the Apple Podcasts gang. And on average, we have 120% like consumption, which means that people, not only do most people listen all the way through, many people listen either to sections twice. And then I forget what the percentage was on that YouTube video, but it was pitiful. You're miles behind, YouTube people.
It's just a completely different attention economy, isn't it?
It's almost like apps designed for consuming podcasts are better for podcasts than YouTube.
I kind of got into this argument earlier this week, and I wasn't really prepared for the conversation. So can you explain again exactly what the problem is with YouTube and podcasts?
The problem is that YouTube is not designed for podcasts. What do you mean? I don't know what you mean by the problem. Like, I don't like YouTube for one, but no. Right, so podcasts in general, one of the things that I really love about podcasts is that it is not quite the final bastion, but it's like one of the last remaining things in like the open web, right? So the way a podcast works, or like what I would consider a podcast, a real podcast like Spinnerproof, is we have a web server. I upload a DRM-free MP3 publicly to that web server, and then there's an open standard called RSS, Real Simple Syndication, and there's a particular extension to that is like standardized across all podcast stuff, and that RSS feed is just a big feed of every single episode, and it's like machine parsable. So it's got where to download the MP3, how long it is, it's got all the show notes and the title and stuff embedded within it. And then anyone can implement an app or service that can consume that feed and do something with it. So the way podcast apps work is you have a subscription list, which is a list of all the RSS feeds that you care about, and they can be hosted anywhere online as long as it's publicly accessible. And then it will parse the RSS feed, find the links to the MP3s, download them and play them. And you can download them to your computer and store them away, archive them for whatever reason. Like, it's like this open, accessible thing, and that's great. YouTube is not this. Like, this is not how YouTube works. Like, you upload your video to this server that you don't own and control. It's played back by YouTube, and it might have stuff injected in it. It does all the sort of like transcoding stuff that's done to varying degrees of quality. Like, YouTube transcoding is not particularly high quality. There's no publicly accessible sort of like open format for the feeds for any individual channels anymore. There used to be. YouTube have slowly taken more and more of that away. Like, the subscription that YouTube lets you do is is more of a hint to the algorithm than ever before. So there's lots wrong with it for me, where you sort of like the creator sort of loses control in a way that I don't like, and as the sort of the other side of that, the person who wants to go and watch this stuff, it's just annoying to have all these restrictions placed on it, where it's like you can't download the video and you can't use multiple clients. Like, you have to use the YouTube app or the YouTube website to listen to it. You can't use some other app to do it properly. Like, there are weird workarounds, but there's that I'm aware of, no official API for it. I'm rambling. The point is, podcasts are all nice and open, and YouTube YouTube is not, and I don't want that to happen. The worst one though is Spotify, which is really awful. Like Spotify and podcast, man, not a fan of that relationship. I don't know where to go from here. I'm rambling and I'm angry about podcasts now.
I don't at all regret setting you off.
I see so many podcasts, like, because it was like the Joe Rogan thing, which I don't listen to, but like Spotify bought him for some ridiculous sum of money, and so now all of those podcasts, all the future ones anyway, will be Spotify exclusive. And that's the thing that really bothers me is, yeah, exactly. It's like, you will not, like, so at the moment, these podcasts, like the Joe Rogan stuff, is accessible in the same way. It's an open podcast in the same way that Spinnerproof is. Anyone can get to the RSS feed, download it, and listen to it in whatever app they want, and it's fine. But as soon as it becomes a Spotify exclusive, you can only listen to it in Spotify, and it's terrible. And the thing is, like, Spotify are buying particular podcasts, podcast production houses, and like podcast distribution platforms. They're buying all of this stuff because they're trying to buy enough of the market that most people feel like they need to have Spotify to listen to podcasts, and then they will become like YouTube, and they will control podcasting in the same way that YouTube controls online video. And I hate that. It's terrible. It's awful. Podcasting is great because no one owns it. No one owns podcasting in that way. So
now I'm angry. This isn't what I wanted for this conversation. I wanted to laugh at Sam nerding out about how YouTube is bad and then move on. I was just going to say something intelligent about the fact there's not a one-to-one relationship between subscription and receiving content, and that was going to be it. And everyone was going to be happy, and now we're all angry. It's all your fault.
And now I worry that I'm going to have upset some of our friends who make podcasts and upload them to Spotify.
I mean, if you're just putting your stuff on Spotify because it's another place for an audience to find it, then brilliant.
Well, no, the thing is...
previously brilliant, maybe not so brilliant now.
Because that's got the same thing, right, where, like, if everything's available on Spotify and the open platform, and then some things are only accessible on Spotify, the result of that is that people won't split their stuff between the open stuff and the exclusives. They'll just use Spotify for everything, which means that it erodes the open side of it. So even if you upload it to both places, because of this sort of like popular exclusives and stuff, they want everyone to just sort of use Spotify for everything. And the thing that's really worth noting here is that Spotify does not integrate with the open standard for podcasts. Like, you can't listen to Spinnerproof, as far as I'm aware, in Spotify. There's nothing, I can't stop Spotify from implementing the RSS crawling stuff. Like, they could put Spinnerproof in there, but because they have got this like motivation not to integrate with the open platform, they're not going to do it, if that makes sense. So this is the thing where if you put it in both places, like the open world and on Spotify, you're eroding the open world by doing that. And that makes me sad.
It's tricky because pretty much everyone that makes stuff, and we're maybe slightly an exception to this, when people make stuff, they want to get it seen or heard by as many people as possible. And that means putting it in as many places as possible. We've never been particularly good at aggressively marketing our stuff. That's never been us. I don't think it ever will be because I'm just so incredibly uncomfortable with it. It's like pure anxiety for me. But putting it in more places is kind of a passive way of doing that as much as anything. So I completely understand why people would do that. It's like an easy thing you can do that is essentially self-maintaining that, I was going to say, gets you more attention, and that's a potentially misreadable way of saying it, but it gets you more eyeballs and earballs. So I completely understand why you would do that. We're weird for spending time making something and then not doing everything we can to get it to as many people as possible. That's weird that we don't do that. And I'm more than fine with it. I think it works for both of us really well. You, I know, would be happy if we never told anyone about this.
Well, it's a balance, right? Like, I think if people didn't listen to Spinnerproof, we wouldn't have made nearly as many episodes as we have. Like, we would have done it for a while and gone, oh, that was a laugh. So having an audience is an important part of making something, this kind of thing anyway. So there is that balance where we want it to be heard by people. But yeah, like like you sort of say, neither of us are particularly fussed if it's every single person that would possibly be interested in it or not. Like, it's, we're the size we are, and that's fine. But like, I think the thing that's probably weird is I have, like, very philosophical reasons for not wanting to put it somewhere else. That's the thing. It's like, not putting it on Spotify could be a point of like apathy easily, but for me it's a very philosophical one of like, I refuse to support that platform. And I also want to make clear as well that I don't begrudge people who do put it on Spotify. It's like, it is what it is. Like, if you want to, I totally get why you'd put it there. I think people should reconsider it personally, but like, maybe I do begrudge people doing it. I don't know how I feel. It's complicated.
You can understand it without liking it.
Yeah, that's right. I understand why you do it. I'd just rather people didn't do it. And the thing that's really sad, right, or that I think is really sad, is that the open side of things is either more complicated or more expensive. And those are the two big barriers. Like, Spinnerproof is the way that it is because I'm very opinionated. I'm a control freak and I have pre-existing skills to do it the way we've done. Like, I know how to set up and run a website. And so I just did that because it's like, oh, I can do it. I'm a control freak about it. So I'm just going to do it. And if you don't have that skill set and can't, and, you know, quite reasonably can't be bothered to learn, platforms like Spotify are very appealing because it's just like, I presume you just upload your audio file and then you're done with it.
I think you have to have it already hosted somewhere. See, this is the thing. YouTube I can understand because it's free hosting, which is the only accessible way of doing this for a lot of people. There's also stuff like Mixcloud, but that's Mixcloud. It's rubbish. I used to have a podcast on Mixcloud. It's not worth it. Whereas if you can get over the little hurdle of being able to put your audio into a video format, then putting it on YouTube makes sense. If you then go the extra length and make the video that is behind it interesting, then yeah, it's probably adding something, as long as you go to the effort of doing that, which I know some people do. So I've always understood and empathised with doing it on YouTube, even though I don't think it's a good user experience. Completely understand the reasons for it. And I feel like this was going somewhere that it isn't. Again, classic Brantley problem.
This has just reminded me of something about that listener experience. I want to get ahead of a comment that I predict might happen with the release of this episode. Because YouTube have recently introduced chapters to their videos, so you can add chapters.
Yes.
And there is a good chance that this episode will have chapters on YouTube if I can be bothered to figure out how they work. And I'm sort of just, I want to preempt to the people being like, see, YouTube is better because you can put chapters in it. And I will say that Spinnerproof has had chapters since like episode 10. And if you used a proper podcast app, you'd have been able to see them already. You can embed them in the MP3 file. And some of the episodes even have specific chapter art. So the artwork that is shown changes depending on the chapter that you're on. So, YouTube, welcome to 3 years ago.
And I'd like to point out that I've known that all along. I've known that you were doing that. I've never actually checked it out on my podcast player.
I don't think anyone ever has. It's funny, like, I put all that time in. No one has ever mentioned it. No one's ever seen the artwork as far as I'm concerned. No one cares. But it has been there. Do
you remember what episode it was you did custom chapter art, and also why?
The why was because I could, and I wanted to see how much extra work it would be. And it was like a BattleBots one. There was like one. I've done it a couple of times, but there was the big one was a BattleBots episode, and I put the fight cards up for each sort of like fight that we were talking about. The chapter artwork was our logo with like the fight card overlaid.
Nice. So that's an exercise for the listener. Go and find out what episode that was for us, because I don't know, and Sam doesn't either.
Go find that. Good luck. Well, that was a long and unexpected rant about podcasting, and I think we should move on from it.
So I've been making good use of the YouTube channel, at least, with my video debut.
Yeah.
Actual video making. God, that was stressful. Trying to do video on this laptop, not fun at all. The amount of times I had to try and render that video. The fact that when I was editing it, I couldn't actually watch anything back. So the only time I knew if I'd got stuff right was once it was rendered, which it often wouldn't do. Horrifying. But I'm really pleased with what came out of it.
I think that video was, or all your videos you've done have been masterpieces, especially considering the power of your laptop. Because like video editing, like I've got quite a powerful computer, and video editing is a pain in the neck for me. And I've had situations where, you know, my software is refusing to render it and stuff. Or similar situations where like I can't see if it's worked completely until I've rendered out stuff. But to not be able to preview any of it until you've rendered it is insane. And I'm amazed that you could be bothered to get over that hurdle.
It's one of those things that wouldn't have happened at any other time. I think the same can be said for all of the stuff I've got done robot-wise over the last couple of months. It wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the situation we're in.
Yeah.
And it's been very, very useful to me that I have been able to get that done, because without that, I think I would have gone insane.
Do you want to take us through all the stuff you've built then, Mr. Productive?
What have I built? So I started and then didn't finish an Amway. I got most of the sort of shell done, and then I had a better idea that I decided to work on instead. So it's like half of Wowbagger is made. I then did the Antweight version of Hello There, And I've also now done a boat, because that's a completely natural progression through those things.
Oh, that boat. It's glorious.
And I guess what also precedes all of this as well is like I completely reorganised the shed and made it into a workspace, which is what has actually allowed all of this to happen. So it's been a productive time, albeit on entirely stupid stuff.
There's nothing stupid about it, man. You know, it's like, you know, like you said, it's keeping you sane, which is important at times like these.
Yeah, it's funny to me, by the way, that it's been so long since we had any kind of mental healthy conversation. I can't think of the last time we actually did. And obviously, we're in a situation now where mental health is a much bigger conversation for a lot of people than it usually is. And we haven't got around to talking about it yet.
Should we do that then? Should we discuss how we've been coping and then move on to other things?
Yeah. So I've been coping by building random stupid stuff. How have you been coping?
The whole lockdown thing has been really interesting. It's so Ryan and I have spoken about this a long time ago, where like through uni and stuff, I struggled a fair bit with depression and stuff. I was really worried coming into this that that was going to become a problem for me again, because what I felt and still feel is that one of the big causes for me struggling with depression and being depressed was a huge amount of unstructured time that I couldn't fill. So a lot of time spent twiddling my thumbs at uni, and that I think is bad for me. It doesn't work well for me. So like the prospect of you're going to be stuck inside for months was not a pleasant thought. Thankfully, it's not been too much of an issue for me. I'm a lot better at managing my time now than I was at uni, and I'm just generally in a better place in life. So the depression side of it hasn't been an issue for me at all, really. I haven't really thought about it, but I have been more anxious than usual. Like I've definitely felt a lot more anxious about things. But what has really sort of hit home, like the last week or so especially, is the realization that I am going to struggle coming out of lockdown far more than I struggled going into it.
You reckon?
Absolutely, yeah. I already have struggled more. Like it's been really interesting where once lockdown in the UK started, there was obviously it's sort of like there's a lot of stress and uncertainty in the few days before it, where there was a couple of times it was like, we've got plans to go and see these people or go to this, like go to whatever in the evening. I think it was like a dance lesson that we were meant to go to. And it was like a few days before all the lockdown thing was announced. And it was like, I don't know whether we should go or not. I don't know whether, like there was a lot of uncertainty around that. But then once lockdown happened and the decisions were taken away from us, and it was like, well, all this stuff is being cancelled. All these plans I had are being cancelled. It's quite funny looking back at my calendar now and seeing, you know, January and February are absolutely packed, and then just nothing, as it was all cancelled and stuff. And that's obviously sad. It's a shame that you know lots of things have been missed. But like once that was all done, I was fine. Like it was like there's a moment of sort of sadness about it, but then it's like, oh well, I've got lots of time to do whatever. Like I'm working from home, so I've freed up about 2 hours a day, not commuting, which is wonderful, not having to drive to and from work every day, which has given me a lot more time for just doing other stuff, like being able to, you know, do more cooking, do more, you know, games, fiddle around with electronics and all kinds of other stuff. Just like all those other little bits and pieces that for me always fall away because I'm, you know, exhausted from work or something. So I've sort of enjoyed quite a lot of it in some ways. I sort of recognise this is not everyone's experience, but for me, there's been more silver linings than massive downsides, I think. But yeah, like the last week or so, there's been situations where it's like, well, you know, I went to go see my family yesterday, and that caused me a lot of stress because I'm so used to being the only one really in control of my time, and I'm quite happy getting on with my own life quietly on my own without really interacting too much with people. And then suddenly it being like, oh, actually, no, I've got to start going back out into the world. You know, I haven't been to the supermarket in a long time. And the other day I went just to make sure that I don't think I'm developing agoraphobia or anything, but I am certainly more anxious about going shopping than I should be. So it's like, well, I've just got to go to do it and make sure that I don't lose the ability to go to the shops without it, you know, destroying me. And the same for like going and seeing my family and stuff. It's like, it's worth doing it to make sure that I don't get too used to being indoors, if that or on my own, I think is probably the big thing. which is why I think I'm going to struggle coming out, because like the transition in was quite fine. There was lots of nice extra stuff that I could do, but then on the way out, it's lovely seeing everyone, but like big social events have always made me a little bit anxious, and now piled on top of that is the distancing stuff, and you know, are other people going to respect that distance? Are other people going to show up even though they've got a cough and stuff like that? So all these extra anxieties piled on top that I think sort of build on stresses that I already had, that I think are going to make the transition out harder for me.
I'm really surprised by a very large amount of that. I kind of assumed, and this is something I always do, I kind of assumed you were like me, you're just kind of excited to get back to stuff. But everything you've said makes complete sense. And it's almost like you're describing things that I used to feel when things were normal, if that makes sense.
Not sure I quite follow.
That's because I phrased it very badly. It's interesting to hear you finding things difficult now that I used to find difficult before this anyway, unless I've read too much into this.
You might have to give me a concrete example of the thing that I said.
Okay, so, for example, you talking about shopping. That's something I used to find really hard just anyway, like going into supermarkets. I would have major anxiety problems in supermarkets. And I guess I don't know if I'm going anywhere with this, actually. I think that's just an observation I've made that I'm now trying to think is deep and probably isn't.
Well, you know, there are obviously differences in people's anxieties. Like I've never enjoyed going and doing big shops, but like, you know, going to a supermarket, like I would go to the shops every day, basically. I'd like buy lunch most days. Or if, you know, Hannah and I were both quite lax about doing weekly shops. So we'd often, like, one of us just pop into the shop on the way home from work or something just to buy dinner for that night. And so, like, going shopping, not stressful in the least before all this. But yeah, now, because it's sort of like it's a very different atmosphere in shops now, because everyone's sort of like trying to keep 2 meters apart, and it's all quite serious in a way that it wasn't before. And then also, I just haven't done it, like for a whole multitude of reasons that we're not going to get too far into. Hannah has been the one to do most of the shopping, and so I haven't been, and I haven't had much experience with the new world of shopping. So it's like it's like nervous about other people, which I often am, because you can't control other people. Plus, just I don't know what it's like. I don't, you know, it's a new experience and stuff, which is anxiety inducing. And I just found it interesting that I had a big resistance to going at all. And it's when I sort of realised that and go, actually, I'm almost scared of going to the shops now. It's like that's not good. This cannot. This is not sustainable. And so it's like, well, I need to start going, and Hannah and I need to share that load more evenly and stuff, because for both of our sakes.
I guess the thing I was really saying earlier is that hearing you say that worries me more than I expected it would. Just because it's like, oh damn, Sam is now feeling like Ryan did 6 months ago. That's not good. No one should be feeling like that.
It's I think it's fine. I think now that I've realised that this is a thing that's happened to me, I think it will, you know, it will be fine. I'm not worried about it in the long term particularly. Ask me about it again in a few months and see if I still feel stressed about going shopping.
I will genuinely try to remember to do that. I probably won't, but I will try.
How's it been for you then? Because I feel like, based on your reaction then, I feel like you found it harder coming in.
No. I felt quite uniquely prepared for a lot of this. In terms of not seeing people, I can do that. No, not necessarily that I should, but I can. Not having to go out to work, I can do that. And none of that has affected me whatsoever. I think it's been much less of a change for me than it would be for most people. You know, up until January, I'd been largely unemployed for a couple of years. So the idea of not going out to work doesn't faze me. I know that period wasn't good for me, but that was for a multitude of other reasons that were the reasons for me being in that situation in the first place. So all of that was absolutely fine. I've not had any real anxiety about getting ill. I have a very, and this isn't a good thing, but it has helped in some respects, I have a very unique view of risk, I think, where knowing there is a thing around that can make me very ill doesn't really bother me because I know the odds are low, which is not a particularly healthy way of looking at things, and I think gets me into trouble more than it gets me out of it. But again, in this specific situation, has prevented a lot of anxiety that I could have felt. The source of anxiety for me came from working from home. It was great to begin with. My job, I think I've spoken about this before a little bit, and I don't want to get too specific just because it's my job, but my job isn't something I could do from home. And my workplace were brilliant in terms of giving us something else to do that wasn't, you know, contributing to our normal role, but it was something that we could be doing and could get into, and I really appreciated that. And for the first few weeks, I really enjoyed it. But then I just became more and more anxious about, am I working enough? Is the work that I'm producing, when it goes off to someone else, going to look like X amount of hours of effort? And that very quickly became an issue for me. That sense of, I can never do enough.
Yeah.
I need to be working constantly. I need to work twice as much to make sure that they don't doubt that I've worked as much as I should. Which, if anything, led to me working less, because I was spending more time faffing around than I was actually doing anything useful. And fortunately for me, just as I was about to go and say something to someone about that, we went back to work anyway. And the relief of that, again, you talk about the sort of transition out, that was such a relief that there was nothing to be anxious about, if that makes any sense whatsoever. It was so much more a positive than it could possibly be a negative. Even though I don't drive, I have to get a bus to work. My bus just didn't exist when we went back. So I was having to spend like an hour and a half every day walking, which I don't enjoy. It physically exhausted me because I was going to work, and again, because we haven't got the kids in, I was doing physical work at work. I was exhausted every day, but I was much happier with that than I was with working from home.
Yeah, I think that's like a fairly common thing for people who are working from home for the first time, of feeling that pressure of, am I doing enough? Does it look like I'm doing enough? Like, what's the external sort of visibility of the amount of work I've done? Which I personally didn't feel very much. I've worked from home once a week for a long time, and doing it full time is not a huge thing. Plus my job is often like this, where I might spend a week on a project and have like 2 or 3 lines of code to show for it. And so this is a feeling that I'm very familiar with, of like, this does not look like a week of work, but I promise you it is. So this is another one of those areas where like it hasn't been a huge thing for me, but it is, like I said, I think it's very common for a lot of people of that, exactly that pressure of, well, either actual pressure from their employer to do a lot, or a perceived pressure, which I think is probably the more common one, that people putting on themselves to do a lot. I think it's quite common and really hard to deal with. So yeah, I completely get it, and I completely understand why, like you said, going back into work is a big release of that pressure. And so yeah, I completely get it.
I think it was especially tricky for me because in my job, you're kind of just paid to exist. Obviously, you have a role, you have responsibilities, but by being there, you're kind of doing some of it already. That's not true in any literal sense, but I think anyone who's done the job would understand that sentence, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, so my understanding anyway is that a lot of, I think what you're getting at there is that by being there, you're available for other people to talk to you, get your help with something, and that kind of stuff. Like part of your job is the physical location that you are, which is different to like an office job, where for me, where I am is irrelevant. Like there's not an enormous amount of value to be gained from being in the same room as the people I work with, really.
I guess for me, there's not really a physical output from my day. Provided I'm there and not being like overtly negligent, I know I've at least done a half decent job. I know I can do far more, and I strive to, and I believe I do every day. But there is that kind of base level of, you're there, you're doing something.
Yeah.
So the idea of having to actually output stuff was quite new and not pleasant. And again, there are parts of it where I sort of took the project and ran with it and did some stuff that I'm really proud of. But there are also some bits where I was definitely sat there at the start of the day going, how do I fill these hours? And I'm very glad not to have to feel that anymore. Very glad.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that for us, I'm going to have to get into specifics here. So I'm what's called a teaching assistant in the UK, which basically means I'm in a class, but I'm not the teacher. I'm kind of the step below. So I'm doing small group work, individual work with children, sometimes taking the whole class in the absence of the teacher. We're back at work at the moment, but we don't have the kids there. So even now, the work I'm doing isn't my normal job. I'm doing stuff around the site. So, for example, a large amount of my week this week was painting arrows on the floor to direct parents through a new route in and out when they drop off and collect. I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks in our little area of forest with a wood chipper. None of this is my normal job, but I have a very clear output from my day.
Yeah.
And even if it comes to it, it's like people can see that I'm in the right place at the right time, so they know I'm doing something. So that doesn't cause me any extra anxiety, even though it's not my normal role.
I think there's something really genuinely wonderful about that kind of work, where you've just got very obvious physical output at the end of every day. that doesn't necessarily require an enormous amount of cerebral work, if that makes sense. Where, because I did before I was a software developer, I was a lab tech for a little while, and so a lot of my job there was, very repetitive. Here's a bunch of boards that are all broken in the same, like bunch of pieces, like circuit boards that are all broken in the same way or in similar ways. You need to repair them, or you need to add this extra feature to them, and it's like, spend a bit of time figuring out how to do it, and then you get a system and you sort of do it and stuff. And I really miss that in a lot of ways, because it's like you get in and you can just sort of do it, and you get to the end of it and you go, well, you can see this stack of stuff that you've done, which you don't get in other types of work. So I think there's something really, like I said, even though it's not what you normally do, I don't know if you feel that or not, but like, even if it's not what you normally do, I for me at least, like that sounds quite nice to have a little break from the usual thing and be able to sort of have a different experience of doing work, I guess.
Yeah, it's nice as a break. I wouldn't enjoy it as my normal, but it is nice as a break. And I will even find, even when the kids are in, and obviously I spend most of my day in the classroom, if there's an opportunity to take an hour out and go and photocopy a load of stuff, I am straight on that. Because I do love a monotonous task.
Yeah.
That chance to just zone out and get stuff done does really appeal to me. And I've had that everywhere I've worked, when I've done sort of the summer school work as well. I love working with the kids, but give me 2 hours of setting up the graduation packs, and yeah, I will run to that job.
Yeah, I enjoy it as well. Even doing what I do now, there's sometimes like some dull bit of refactoring or very mechanical work that's just copying and pasting code around or something. And I don't always volunteer for it, because it's not quite as satisfying as having like a physical output from it, but it is something I'm quite happy to do, because yeah, it's nice to sort of just zone out and get it done. And you get to the end of it and go, yeah, I've achieved a lot of stuff today, and it's quite nice.
And to sort of round out the anxiety journey that I'm trying to describe here, I think things are going to get tougher again, sort of in a week's time as we record, when we are going to have the kids back in. And obviously our whole way of working is now completely changed, probably for the medium to long term. And not knowing what that's going to look like, that is bothering me at the moment. And I think it's bothering everyone, and if it didn't, that would be weird. But the fact that we've got to take, 5 and 6 year old children who've already had a very strange few months and bring them into a world that's really alien to them. Where, in schools in the UK, we've basically had to strip everything nice out of the physical environment. And we're kind of set up like old school Victorian classrooms with seats in very spread out rows and columns, which I don't think they're going to like. We'll do our best to make it inviting with the sort of human side of it, but it's not anything like we would ever want it to be. And that is quite upsetting to sort of, it feels like we're the people who've done it to them, even though we're doing it for exactly the right reason. It feels like we're kind of inflicting this upon them, and that's not a very nice feeling. But then give it 2 weeks, it'll probably feel normal. Yeah,
totally agree with like the sort of like anxiety from unknown stuff. Like that's definitely a big thing of like, we don't know what it's going to look like, and that is an anxiety inducing prospect.
But on the sort of better side of it, I do feel, lucky isn't the right word, privilege is probably the right word, but I don't like using it. I'm very glad that my job is safe at the moment.
Yeah.
That's pretty damn good. So for all of the stress it has caused me, and there was a period where I wasn't sure how safe it was, to be fair, but all the stress it has caused me is stress worth having to still have, my normal income, and to have that fairly safeguarded for the future. Public sector, chef's kiss right there. Love it.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, like all the different, like everyone I know, I think everyone has a very unique experience of this, because I think it's just like your experience of this whole situation is so dependent on such an enormous array of factors, like, I've had a lot of cards dealt in my favour in many ways, like, I'm a bit of an introvert, lots about my personality and my interests mean that I'm quite happy on my own. And, my job is probably not as safe as public sector stuff, but it's also not, I'm not too worried about it at the moment. So there's lots of cards sort of like in favour there. But then for someone who's like very, very similar to me, but maybe doesn't have quite the same job security, it just completely changes your experience of lockdown and the whole situation. It's just sort of like amazing. I think everyone just has a slightly different set of these inputs almost, and just consequently has quite wildly different experiences of it.
And I think the biggest sort of card, as you put it, in both of our favour, if you don't mind me speaking for you a little bit, is that we came into this with an awareness of our mental health and what affects it. Whereas I think a lot of people are having to work that out for the first time. And the most important thing that I've understood through all of this, which I haven't always expressed in the best way when talking to people about it, but the most important thing I've always understood is that just because my situation is better than some people's doesn't mean I can't not like it. Doesn't mean that it can't cause me stress and anxiety and everything.
Yeah.
Because I think if this came up a few years ago, I would definitely have been trying to kind of stiff upper lip through everything and not allowing myself to feel anxious, to feel stressed about things in the way that I naturally have.
Yeah, that's a really sort of valuable thing to be able to do is recognize, people have it worse than me, but it doesn't invalidate your own sort of experience of it in many ways. Like you're allowed to feel crap about your situation even if other people have it worse.
That's such a well put statement. I almost don't want to follow it.
I think the flip side of that obviously is also, is continuing to be aware of other people's situations and trying to be mindful of that. Like I feel I'm always very conscious talking about my situation because I think I'm really fortunate in so many ways where, like I said, coming into lockdown hasn't massively negatively affected me. It's not like I'm going to look back on this time as the worst time in my life, but I think for many people it is the worst time in their life. And so it's like, I think there's definitely value in understanding that, your experience is not the same as everyone else's, and try to be mindful of that and not, and to not be too, like I said, it's like you're obviously allowed to feel the way that you feel and express your own, and express that. But I also think it's worth being mindful of not being flippant with it, and just being like, oh, lockdown's not that bad. Like, I feel like I've caught myself a couple of times being a little bit sort of like, oh, it's not that bad, it's fine. When actually, for me, it's not too bad. But for many other people, it's horrific.
I'm about to make a really weird analogy. I don't know if it's going to hold up. So I don't know if it's going to make an edit. But this is like the pineapple on pizza thing. It's like, you don't have to like it to appreciate that I like it. Everyone's going to react to this differently. And you don't have to react the same. You don't have to feel the same way other people do. I would still say that overall, for me personally, this has been like a neutral to a slight plus. With the slight plus purely being that I've got robot stuff done. That's enough of a plus for me in my life. Although I do think that, kind of like you're saying with coming out of it is going to be harder, I think the thing I'm going to struggle with is the long term, everything is different. When things are really different, that's easy for me. It's when things are almost the same that I find things hard. So, for example, I've always found it really hard when people get haircuts because they look like them but slightly not. Mm-hmm. I don't like it when like furniture in a room gets rearranged, which is exactly what we've done to the whole school at the moment, so that's really fun. Little things like that I think bother me a lot more than big things. So I guess, and I hadn't appreciated this until you said it, I guess for me the danger is maybe still ahead a little bit.
Yeah. It is. It's just, it's only a very recent realization for me that the stress for me, I think, is still ahead. And I don't really know how to deal with it.
But, again, if we're going to be talking about privilege, as it were, in 5 weeks' time, I've got 6 weeks off work, so...
That's been another really interesting thing about like different people's careers and stuff and their jobs. Like, like lots of options. Some people have just outright lost their job, and that's really awful. It's a terrible time to have that happen. And then the other end of the spectrum is like I can do exactly my job from almost anywhere, and so I'm still working the same number of hours as I was before. Just the only thing that's changed is the location, and that's nice in many ways. I've got things to do in a day, and that helps keep me sane and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, every now and then I sort of think almost would furlough have been nicer, because it's like we're still being paid. I think, are you being paid? Maybe not.
80%, yeah.
80%. So you're still getting some income, but you don't actually have to work. It's sort of like a couple of people I know are in that situation, and I don't know whether that's a good situation or a bad situation. I just sort of think it's just another interesting difference between everyone, like exactly what happens with that. Because I think if I were furloughed, I think on the one hand it'd be quite nice because I'd have a lot more time. Like I had a week off recently from work, which I enjoyed immensely. But I think if I was furloughed at the beginning, I'd have really struggled. I think I could only enjoy that week off because I've learned how to deal with a lot more downtime. So it's just sort of really, I don't know what my wide point is here, but it's just the difference in all this stuff I just think is really interesting.
From what I've seen of other people in that situation, the transition back is really rough.
Yeah.
Super rough.
I wonder what like the long-term societal changes of some of this are going to be, I wonder.
Oh, God. I'm not sure I even want to speculate. I feel like they're not going to be as good as they could have been.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think when this all first started, I was sort of thinking, maybe hopefully I'll just be able to work from home indefinitely. And I still kind of think that way, but like more recently, it's been like, well, actually working from home is annoying because it means I need to leave this room in a state that's fit for me to work from most of the time, which is restrictive outside of work hours. So there are pros and cons to all these things.
I think I could have a very lengthy conversation about the changes I think could have come from this that I don't think will. But I think it's going to be, for me, too political to say this publicly. If that makes sense. It's like, I have strongly held beliefs that apparently I don't hold strongly enough to express them, which I'm sure is a really good sign for those beliefs.
Maybe I'll express some of my hopes and see how close they are to yours, if at all. But like the things I was hoping for me at least, being able to work from home more. The other big dream that I had that I don't think will happen is a 4-day work week, because I think a lot of people who are working from home 5 days a week are feeling a lot more that sucks. And I felt that since I entered the workforce, where 5 days is 1 day too many. And so
my work is actually transitioning into a 4-day week.
Oh, get you. Living the dream.
Yeah, we're doing a slightly late finish one night in return for a day off. The idea being, really, it's an infection control thing in terms of we're going to have the children in for 4 days, and we're then going to have a 72-hour break, which obviously we're still doing a deep clean after school on a Thursday, but it does just mean as well that anything that is left around is more likely to, I don't know, this isn't the scientifically correct term, die off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically letting the school sterilise itself a bit. And also, I think for our mental health, it is really important. That's another reason that they've done that, because they could have just had us in to clean all day Friday, which we would have been fine with. That would have been a perfectly acceptable way of doing things. But instead, I think they have pushed really hard to make it a full day off with no expectation to work from home, which is a bold move that I massively respect.
Yeah. One other sort of like societal, slightly more political change that I would like to have happened that I'm not convinced will, which is better pay for many groups of people. Like, I think this has exposed just how criminally underpaid everyone that was classified as an essential worker, basically. What we've understood is that all the people who work in jobs that are required for society to continue are the people who are so clearly not paid enough. Like anyone in healthcare, anyone doing education stuff, like teachers are criminally underpaid, and everyone doing stuff to keep all the shops and stuff running, like all the supply chain for our food, criminally underpaid. And I really, really want for that to be rectified, for minimum wages to be increased, and for like healthcare and education and all that kind of stuff to just, get a fair wage, and to get like risk payment and stuff like that as well in situations like this. I don't expect it to happen in the UK at least, but it would be nice if that happened.
I've got a hill I'm going to die on.
Okay. What have I said that's triggered this?
This is a risky one. I'm going to say it. I personally would not have included teachers on that list.
Why not?
I do not believe that we in education have been nearly as important in this situation as definitely healthcare workers, but I would also say, supermarket workers, way more important than us right now. Hugely more important.
Yeah.
I think that there are so many people outside the public sector who are completely pivotal to a society functioning, and we don't make that list. We are a luxury, and I agree we're underpaid. Absolutely, I'll sing that from the rooftops any day, because I think that is an issue of people underestimating the skill involved. But in terms of actually keeping a country running, no, we're long-term important. Short-term, you can do without us.
The thing, right? I don't want to degrade teachers with what I'm about to say. There is long-term benefits of teaching are enormous. Obviously, like having an educated population, super important, and like you said, there's a lot of skill involved in teaching at all levels. The other big factor that schools provide is freeing up time for the parents to do other stuff. I know the people I work with who are now at home with their kids are less productive in whatever sort of field they're in, because the kids are there.
Yeah, and that has been our key value at this time. It has not been teaching, it's been childcare. I don't like that I drew that distinction there. That sounds really demeaning to people who would identify themselves as working in childcare. You know what I mean? It has not been the education side that has been valuable. So don't look at us as the valuable people. Look at the people that are doing that all the time anyway.
Yeah. But my point is, I would, if you were to, God, like put all those groups of people in order of their sort of importance in the short term. While I can see where you're coming from to say that teachers are not the most important, I still think that it is an important thing to have.
Oh yeah, and I'm not like arguing against our existence. I'll point that out. I'm not putting myself out of a job here.
Well, my overall point was all these people are criminally underpaid, and I want that to be rectified.
Absolutely. And I guess we haven't exactly followed a scale of importance here. If there's one other thing I would put out there as a change that I would like to see, at least the one that I'm happy to discuss, is in the field of education, and that is a decreased reliance on standardised testing. We're in a situation right now where a lot of kids who were coming up to exams are not going to be able to sit those exams. Well, they haven't been able to already. And that means that we've had to look at other ways of assessing them for them to move forwards. And the way that that is being done is by their teacher saying how good they are at stuff. And it still baffles me that that is not the norm anyway. Teacher assessment is by far the best way to get a representative view of a child's capabilities, abilities and attitudes, most importantly.
Yeah, but you can't compare that across multiple schools across the nation, right? You can't then rank all the schools.
Which is, of course, a tragedy.
Imagine not being able to get a big leaderboard of the best schools in the country. What a huge loss that would be to society.
I'm surprised it's not already just been burned to the ground, frankly.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that's another thing I'd like to see, but again, I won't get too deep into it. Not because I don't have conviction in my beliefs, just because I feel like I should be more prepared to speak about them. I should say, by the way, that I have discovered that I've had recently quite a few messages from people sort of saying about us talking about mental health on the podcast and that being a good thing. And I've not replied to any of those because A, I'm a terrible person, but B, because we haven't spoken about it for a while. And I feel really bad. These are messages from a while ago that I've only just realised exist because that's the way Facebook messaging works. And they're like from a time where we were doing it quite regularly, and there's been this big gap where we just haven't, which for me at least has been motivated by just feeling like I'm doing better than I was. I don't know if it's the same for you.
I think that's pretty much I would say that's pretty much the reason. I think we've both been in better places the last, year or so, possibly a bit longer. And so, yeah, it's not like, the state of our mental health is not, well, for me at least, has not been the forefront of my mind in the way that it was when we started Spinnerproof.
But yeah, because we haven't spoken about it, it's made me feel sort of quite weird getting back to those messages. So if those people are still listening, I am very sorry that I didn't get back to those. I hope you understand why, if that makes sense. And on a sort of more general note, I'm really glad we've done it again. I'm glad we got back to talking about it, even though it's probably a sign that we're not doing as well as we were.
Yeah, it's funny when everything's normal, when I'm sort of like, well, for me at least, maybe normal is not quite the right word, but when I'm not thinking about it, when I'm in a place where I don't feel like I am anxious or like really stressed or feeling sad or anything like that, when I'm in that place, it's really hard to talk about it and not feel immensely fraudulent in so many ways. Because although I have the experience, when you're not living it anymore, it's surprisingly hard to go back and feel those feelings in the same way. So I think it's hard to talk about, try and sort of like, it's hard. I think it's hard for me, at least, it's hard to talk about historical stuff for this. Like, it would be hard for me. It was hard when we first did it, and I think it'd be really hard now to talk about my experience through university, because that's a long time ago now. And, partly I don't want to relive those feelings, and partly I'm not sure I could, even if I tried hard. And so it's hard to talk about. But like, obviously at the moment, the stress and the anxiety I feel is stress and anxiety that I'm feeling right now again. So it's much easier to talk about.
I do, however, think there is value, and it would require a conscious effort. There is value in having these conversations when we're feeling okay, just to discuss feeling okay. Yeah,
almost as if we should have had a second podcast.
Oh God, I was about to bring that up and decided not to, but we did try to do that. We did that one recording, didn't we, where it was like me trying to talk through my mental health history, and yeah, it was exactly like you described. It just evolved into storytelling and me trying to feel sad about things that I no longer feel so, or at least in the moment didn't feel so sad about. It was like I was trying to... Oh, God. Have you ever milked a cow?
What? No.
So when you milk a cow, this is so weird. It's like you have to like prepare the cow a little bit. And it was like I was trying to prepare myself to milk myself emotionally to like make a good episode.
Oh dear.
It's like I was just at that point I was just like a depression and anxiety cow. And the podcast would have been a big old bottle of depression and anxiety milk.
Oh, this is by far the weirdest analogy I think you've ever made.
You're not wrong. And I'm very self-conscious about it, but I can't stop.
Oh dear. No, that podcast didn't get off the ground for a great many reasons, and it's fine.
If we could have made it work, it would have been good, but I don't think we were the people to make it work.
I think I have finally stopped paying for that domain now, by the way.
Good. I'll delete the logo off of my laptop. Boy, that got weird fast.
We mentioned this earlier. You've done a lot of building of stuff recently, and I would love for you to share with everyone more about what you've been building.
I don't know what more there is to say about what I've been building. I'm more interested in what you've been working on. Because everything I've done is now kind of down in video form.
Everything I do is top secret, man. I'm like the Spinnerproof R&D department working with utmost secrecy.
See, this is the thing. It's like when I work on stuff, I'm rushing towards an end product. I like being able to post the photo or post the video, which is weird for me because it used to be that I was the person holding us back from finishing stuff. Like my over-planning, my fear of taking on a task, because before you take on a task, there's always a chance it's going to go perfectly, but once you do, that perfection is lost. And something has clicked recently where I'm just getting stuff done and it's not that I'm not worrying about the quality. I'm still trying to make it good, but I'm certainly accepting, maybe it's the Kylo build that did it, but I've kind of learned to value the finished thing over the perfect idea of the thing. And I think that has come through in the stuff I've built, especially the boat, let's be honest.
I think you've just crystallized exactly why I've loved seeing all the stuff you've made, which is that like you have finished projects, and I've really loved seeing that. I've loved seeing because like you said, there are times where like we're both perfectionists. I think we both have like the perfect idea of what we want to build, and like you said, once you start it, you immediately lose that perfect. You lose the opportunity to have the perfect end product, and so I've really loved seeing you clear that hurdle and actually finish stuff.
I think there are two big reasons behind it. Number one is just that I've had the motivation to make stuff. And that was the fact that I was working from home and I was basically working from my bed. And when I finished work, I wanted to go somewhere else, and the shed was the next best place. And that's partly why, once I started doing stuff, I did start finishing stuff because of that. That's definitely a thing. But I think the other thing is that I haven't had you to lean on. I think the dynamic we've had as a team is Ryan has ambitious ideas and relies on Sam to make them to a better standard than he could. That, I think, has been a big part of the team dynamic. And again, the Kylo build helped in terms of us just getting together and getting it done, and that being the goal. But even then, who did most of the cuts? Who did most of the drilling? Who did most of the things that could go wrong? And it was you, because I didn't want to get them wrong.
I think it's a really interesting dynamic we have, because so I'm on my own as well, and I can't get past the planning phase. And I think it's really interesting that when we're together, a lot of the ideas, I think, for you've drawn up the plans for the cuts to be made, and like I can make the cuts. Like I'm very happy to be told this is where the cut is going to be, and make a straight cut and all that kind of stuff. Like I'm happy to do that, and stuff. And I think it's really interesting that when we're sort of when we can't work together on a robot, it's just sort of interesting to lose, because like you're saying that you lean on me for the sort of manufacturing side of it, but like I feel like I definitely lean on you for the design side of it.
But you're always so opinionated on so many elements of the design.
Yeah, the problem is I end up arguing with myself and then get nothing done. Whereas I think when you're working together, it's like, well, I'm now wasting two people's time by arguing this. So I think I'm a lot quicker to go, well, it does. At the end of the day, The phrase I'm gonna use is I'm a lot quicker to compromise, which is not meant to say that what we come up with is a compromise anyway. But it's like I'm a lot quicker.
Is it to say that I'm stubborn?
No, not even that either. It's just sort of like something that I'm a lot quicker to come to the conclusion that any decision is better than no decision. You know, it's like, well, we need to make the decision, and it's like, well, let's just do it however it is that we do it, whether it's the way that you came up with or the way that I came up with or whatever, or something in between. It's like, I don't know.
You've always had the shorter route to pragmatism, I think.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Being pragmatic about it, just being like, well, we're here. We've only got a certain amount of time together. We could spend the entire time arguing about not arguing. We could spend the entire time discussing how we're going to do it, or we could just do something. And I'm a lot better at that when there's someone else around. When I'm on my own, I'm really bad at just doing something.
Tell you what, though, I do miss the debate. I miss the collaborative problem solving.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that makes us both better, being able to bounce the ideas off each other and challenge each other's thoughts.
I don't know if it makes the end product any better, though. In principle, it should. And I guess there have been some things where I've kind of bounced ideas with you via messages and little videos. So some of that has still kind of gone on. But I think a lot of it has basically been, Sam, will you please give me affirmation of my idea?
Yeah.
Something else, by the way, that I think has helped me get stuff done is the fact that I have invested in parts, and I've just by working from home, I've saved a certain amount of money every month from travel that I have invested into robot stuff. And I did that very intentionally. It also helps I had a big tax rebate come through, which normally I would just sit on and let be there as contingency. But I was like, no, I need to survive this period. I'm buying robot bits. So the fact that, I've had material to waste. If I get a cut wrong, I can just remake the part. That's made a big difference. And also having a space has made a big difference. Having a space that is always set up has been a big deal for me. And from the conversations we've already had about this, I wonder if that's the thing that holds you back most. The fact you don't have a space that you can just leave messy at the end of the day and go back to. You're not having to spend 10 minutes for every hour tidying back up or setting up.
I don't know. I don't know what holds me back. It's easy to make excuses and go, well, I don't have the tools that I want or the space that I want. And I can fix the tools things by spending money on tools. But when I get to that decision, I go, well, I don't... I struggle to spend money on tools for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, like it would be easy, I think, to point the finger and go that the only room I can really work in is the office. It's the room I'm in right now. And if my desk is messy, I can't work for my job. I can't get paid. So yeah, at the end of any day, building or tinkering with something, I do need to clear it up. And there have been a couple of times in the last few weeks where I've not been able to do that. It's either been too late to get the Hoover out, or I've just been knackered and can't be bothered. And then it means that the next day I end up spending the morning working from home, just on the laptop in the living room, rather than at my nice desk with the nice keyboard and the nice screen and stuff, because the room is just too messy for me to function in. And so it is annoying not having a space that I can dedicate to work, and then another space that's separate that I can dedicate to making stuff. And maybe that would be it. Maybe that would be the final thing. But I also want to, I want to be realistic about the kind of person I am as well, and go, well, if I did have a room that had, a drill press and a bandsaw and a table saw and all the tools imaginable, all the clamps and everything and all the material, realistically, would I spend all of my time or any of my time in there building stuff, or would I continue to do what I do, which is either watch TV, films, YouTube, or play video games? And I don't know. I can't honestly say that I would then spend more time building stuff rather than just piddling away time online. I don't know. I find that hard.
Here's my conceit at the moment. The stuff you've been working on recently is stuff that you can just sit and do at your desk. It's stuff that I imagine takes 2 or 3 minutes to get ready. And that means, if you're like me, because this is how it's worked for me, I got a workspace set up with all the stuff I needed, and that has meant that making stuff no longer has to be by appointment. I no longer have to tell myself, tomorrow I've got the whole day, I will set up the workspace, work through the day, and tidy up again. So much of the stuff I've done has been me going out to tinker with something for 5 minutes and staying for 3 hours. It's been that sense of, I can just quickly do this, which I don't think you have in the same way that I do. When it takes 20 minutes to set up, you don't go down for 10 minutes. You go down for a day.
I can't do that for mechanical stuff. Like the thing that takes a long time to set up is any work that requires mechanical things. So setting up this room so that I can make cuts in plastic and then assemble it, and like actually, you know, the physical building of the robot, that is something that takes a long time to set up and then makes an enormous mess that I've then got to tidy up and clean before I get to doing it. But recently, if you follow us on Twitter, you may have seen me playing with electronics, and I think it's telling that the thing that I've been able to really get my teeth into is like you said, the stuff that I can do, set up on a desk quickly and then tidy up quickly. Like before we started recording, my desk was covered in electronic components, and it took me 5 minutes to put that all back into the drawer that has it all in, and I have a nice clean desk again. And I think that is a big difference. And I think it's also quite interesting and telling that the thing that I find has really grabbed me is, shockingly, the software development stuff. Like, I've really enjoyed fiddling around with the Arduino stuff. So the thing that I have a lot of experience in is the stuff that I can sort of like quickly get into. Like, it doesn't take me long to set up for writing code, but it does take me a long time to set up both physically and mentally for doing the cuts and stuff like that.
So you're saying I was right?
You were right in some ways, but I'm not sure. But the thing is, like, I'm not sure if having a workshop for the physical stuff would make me do more physical stuff. I think it would probably help a little, but I don't know that it would necessarily result in me building complete robots on my own, because I think there's like just personality and interest stuff. Like, solving mechanical problems is less engaging to me than solving the electronics ones. Like, I've really enjoyed being like, well, how do I communicate with an Arduino from a transmitter? How do you do that? How does that work electronically? And I can do that now. And then how do you use an Arduino to control RC components? It's an interesting problem that I can solve and have solved. I know how to do that now, and all these other things. So yeah, I look forward to when this is over and we can meet up again and bring our two new worlds together.
It'd be like the climactic final scene of a Power Rangers episode. This is the kind of thing that I've wanted to sort of interrogate via this episode, if that makes sense. The kind of thing that I could have just had as a normal conversation with a friend, but apparently I need, you know, a construct around to do, which is what parts of this hobby actually interest you. Because I think I've had a lot of very strongly formed ideas of what it is you enjoy that I think were almost entirely incorrect.
So I want to be really clear. I enjoy everything. Like, I've enjoyed every step of building every robot we've built together. But I think it's definitely clear that I think trying to sort of think. I think the thing for me is that I'm lazy and I'm impatient. And the thing that gets me with all the physical stuff is it takes a long time to not achieve a lot of stuff sometimes. You know, you sort of spend all day working really hard and making lots of cuts, and you get to the end of it and you go, there's not a lot that's necessarily changed. Whereas with the electronics side of stuff, I don't feel the same. Like, I can be a lot quicker about it. Like, and this might be the other way around. Like, if you had an Arduino and a bunch of LEDs, while I have every faith that you could do everything that I've done, I think that the roles would reverse in that it would take you a long time to do it, in the way that it takes me a long time to do to sort of like do the mechanical builds. Whereas because I can spend an hour and then have a complicated system with electronics and software that works the way that I want, because, you know, like, I'm impatient and I want the quick wins and stuff. Like, because I've got, you know, a degree and then four or 5 years experience in this kind of stuff. Like, I can do it a lot quicker, and I enjoy that. I don't know if I've been insulting there, and I apologise if I have.
No. If anything, I still find it weird, and this happens a lot, I should be used to it. I find it weird to hear you describe yourself as anything like lazy. Because I've always viewed you as so much the opposite, if only just in comparison to me. You know, you are a more productive person than I am, generally speaking. And you are someone who is far more patient than me when it comes to learning new things. I think the only time I've sort of seen your impatience, which I've viewed more as enthusiasm, is, for example, when we were building Hello There, you found it really hard to end a day without a test drive.
Yeah.
Or without testing the thing we'd made. You needed it to be finished.
Yeah.
But again, that to me didn't come across as impatient. That comes across as enthusiastic to see the result and to get the test data to plan ahead for next time of what we're going to change or what we're going to not change. I
wonder if maybe a more concrete example of me being like lazy or impatient is, so one of your ant weights, you have a titanium wedge, right, which you cut with hand tools. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, were I in your position, I would not have used titanium. I do not have the patience to sit there for however long it took you to make that cut. Like, I just wouldn't have bothered. I'd be like, well, I haven't got an appropriate power tool for this, and I'm not doing it by hand. And that's sort of, that's the thing that gets me. It's like it's better now that I've got a jigsaw in that I can make quick cuts in HDPE, and it's not a big of a deal. But like, I felt it a lot when doing Hello There, where, you know, it took us, how long did it take us to do those cuts on the frame rails? It was like,
yeah, the frame rails were many hours. It was like 4 hours total cutting.
Yeah, it was just ridiculous how long it took us to make that cut, because we didn't have power tools for it. I mean, all we had was this blunt mitre saw thing.
Well, to be fair, we had a tool that would have done it a lot faster, but I insisted we do it in the mitre saw to get the most accurate cut possible. Which I feel like you were only barely okay with to begin with, and within the first hour you were already livid about secretly.
Because, you know, I wasn't livid about it. It was fine. Like, I'm glad, you know, I'm glad that we've done it the way we've always done the stuff. And this is the other thing about having two people, right? Where, like, on my own, I wouldn't have done that. I would not have finished that thing. I'd have got 2 minutes into making that cut, gone, this is ridiculous, I can't be bothered to do this. And without having that external encouragement and being able to share the load, because obviously we both made those cuts and stuff, without being able to sort of switch in and out and having the sort of like mutual encouragement to each other to get it done, I wouldn't have done it. Whereas you seem to be more willing and able to sit through a 40-minute cut or whatever to get a titanium wedge, or however long it took you to do it. I don't know.
40 minutes is probably generous.
But that's I think where my sort of impatience and stuff gets me, where like I sort of have an ambitious idea for like what I want to make. I've tried making cogs a few times, and I tried cutting them by hand with a coping saw, and it takes forever. And I've tried doing it with a jigsaw, and it's less precise and still takes forever. And I was sort of thinking, would a bandsaw make that quick enough that I would actually sit through and do it? I don't know. Maybe it would. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think lazy and impatient, I think kills a lot of projects for me, where I can't be bothered to do the work required to have done it. There's a lot of things where I'd like to have built a robot, but not necessarily want to actually build one, if that makes sense.
So what do you think you bring to the team of the two of us?
I don't know. What do I bring?
Because I have a really strong idea of what you bring, but it seems like every time we discuss it, you're telling me the opposite. So I see you as the person with the patience to be precise and the person who values the precision, but that's time and time again proven not to be true.
I do like being... What do you mean by time and time again proven not to be true? What do you mean by that?
You're always the first person to abandon trying to be precise. I'm the one trying to cling on to precision. And again, it's because you're the pragmatist. You're the person realising that we don't have the skills and equipment to be as precise as I want us to be. And you're also the first person to realise that it probably doesn't matter as much as I'm telling myself it does. I
think that's the thing, is it's less that I'm sort of like, oh, it's not worth being precise. Because I think that I would love to be more precise than we are building robots, for sure. But it is, I'm very quick to go, we could be precise enough, but it would take forever and I can't be bothered to do it. Or we could, or you know, often it's also we just don't have the tools to be as precise as we want to be. And that's the way it is. So yeah, maybe it's just being pragmatic about it. But I don't know, what do I bring? I mean, I don't know, I just think we just keep each other in check. I think if, left to your own devices, you've built a lot of very uncompetitive things, and that's great. I love that you've done that.
I mean, you're not wrong.
and you should absolutely do that. But left to my own devices, I would be so obsessed with trying to come up with a competitive design that is perfect. I'd be so focused on trying to do that I would never do it. And so between us, we sort of balance that out, where we've built robots that are silly in lots of ways, and competitive in lots of ways, but more importantly, they exist, which is the thing that I would not do on my own.
See, this is the thing. I think if we take getting it done out of the equation, you on your own could build something really good.
Oh, so could you, though.
No, I couldn't. Or at least I couldn't yet, is probably the better way of putting it. Or at least I wouldn't try. I think that's the big thing. I just wouldn't try. One of the things that's been good about the last couple of months is that I've been able to pursue stupid or self-indulgent ideas without feeling like I'm wasting time, because the time is there to waste.
Without me breathing over your shoulder being like, it's not competitive enough.
See, this is the thing. It's when we work together, we have very different instincts on things. So it's you've been making what you've been making, and my first thought was, well, what robot are you putting it on? And you were like, well, I'm kind of not. Which just didn't make sense to me whatsoever. which is why I think we need to work together.
I think like earlier I sort of made a bit of a joke about like just doing R&D, and I think that is sort of actually quite true, where like, a lot of the stuff I'm doing, I don't expect it to make it onto a robot that I build on my own particularly, but I think it's useful information, useful knowledge for next time we're working together on a robot that will exist.
What you're working on right now is damn well making it onto a robot.
The other thing that I think I've sort of like bought in the early days, it's less true now, but like when we first started doing it, it was like, well, I had the space to do it and the tools to do it, which you didn't.
And the expertise.
And well,
this is something I was going to bring it round to, is the fact that I now can build robots on my own. I could not have done that if I hadn't started out with you. No chance. Absolutely no chance. You always had the ability to make something. Not necessarily the inclination, but you always had the ability. I didn't.
Expertise is strong, but I get your point. Like
okay,
I have
domain knowledge. You're more comfortable with domain knowledge.
I did have experience with electronics before that, and some level of like knowing how to cut stuff, I suppose. But yeah.
So how many times have I sent you a photo on WhatsApp of wires plugged into a receiver and gone, can you just check this is right before I turn it on?
Maybe I should do that with you. Maybe next time I do something on the breadboard, I'll send you a picture of it and go, can you just check this is all right?
The more important question, though, is when was the last time I did that?
It's been a while, actually. I think, did you ever send me anything about the boat?
Nope.
No, you just did that.
I didn't send you any... Oh, this is another project I did for work. I did a little sort of dancing robot thing that, again, I didn't ask you to check anything on that because I've now learned to do it independently. This is actually a really good demonstration of a certain educational philosophy that I enjoy, but no one else will. Yeah, in terms of, I probably could have done this myself sooner, but having you there to check with is what got me to do it myself, to have the confidence to do it myself. It was like that intermediate step. It's called the zone of proximal development. Look it up if you want, it's interesting. But it's like, I needed to have you there to check with in order to make the step to doing it myself. What I'm really saying is that I no longer need you. But
yeah. This is what we're learning. What we're learning is that the end of Spinnerproof is nigh because I have now Ryan's moved on from me, doesn't need me anymore, and I am incapable of building things on my own.
The test is going to be the fact that I still want to get not a good Beetle, but a Beetle weight scale robot done before what would have been RoboNerd. That's my deadline.
So something I think is really interesting is that Beetles have always been my ambition. I've never really sat down to try and design an ant weight because it's just not an interesting weight class to me. And I think that I'll be curious to see what it's like when you do build a Beetle, because I'm sure you'll do it. But just to see like how much harder you think it is, if at all.
The difficulty I'm going to have with building a Beetle is that I can't hot glue everything together. And again, when we talk about precision, one of the things that really stresses me out is drilling into the ends of pieces to screw them together. I hate that. And I'm going to have to do that by myself, when normally it's like a two-man job of looking at different angles of the drill and checking it straight.
We need a drill press. That's like so annoying not having a drill press. Maybe I should just... every time we have this discussion, I sort of think maybe I should just bite the bullet and just buy tools.
Tools that you won't use without me being there.
That is exactly the line of reasoning that it always comes down to, and the thing that always stops me from actually buying the damn tools is I can't convince myself that I'll actually use them, and it's infuriating. I wish I could get out of this trap in my head, because I sort of think, well, if I had a drill press, I'd be able to do this, 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 and this. And then I go, but will you actually ever get off your arse and do that? And I don't know. And so then I don't buy the tool. I got over this a little bit recently, right? So like I've felt this about electronics for a long time as well, thinking, well, if I had an Arduino, I could do this, 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 and this. And thought, well, if I actually have it, is it worth spending the money? And recently I thought, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to buy the electronics to do it. So I bought the Arduino and a breadboard and a bunch of like components and stuff. I recently ordered like 2,600 resistors because I got fed up with only having one value of resistor. And then like the few times we've needed it, I've been like, well, I'm just going to do the maths, figure out what resistor value we need for this particular project, and then order like 10 of them on eBay. And I'm fed up with that. So what I've done this time is just ordered like 20 of every resistor value under the sun. So hopefully to reduce the barrier, and hopefully this will to prove to myself that actually having the stuff makes a big difference. And obviously, I've had the Arduino and I have spent most evenings since I got it playing around with it and learning exciting new things. So
are we actually going to talk about what you've been doing, even if it's just in the broadest imaginable strokes? Because it is super cool to me.
I mean, right.
It's probably old hat to some people, but I'm really excited about the potential opportunities it opens up for us building cool stuff.
Right. So my hesitance to talk about it is not out of secrecy. It's not like I want to be secret or anything about it. It's just something I know about myself is that the more I talk about an ambitious project, the less likely I am to do it. I'm much better about just quietly doing something and then here it is, it's done.
But as you've ascertained, I'm not going to let that happen now. This is my place in the team. It's making you follow through.
You can force us to put this technology in it. Right, so I have an Arduino, and as I mentioned earlier, I have now figured out how to make the radio transmitter receiver thing talk to the Arduino. I can read PWM values, and I know how to send PWM signals out of the Arduino to control common RC components. And what I want is a semi-autonomous weapon. And I use the words semi-autonomous in very broad senses with big scare quotes around them, because basically I want a button on the front of the robot that when you hit, it fires the weapon. And I have now figured out all the pieces to do that. So I've got an Arduino, and I can make it, I had it set up so that you could like flick a switch on the transmitter to turn the autonomy stuff on and off. I've got it to like do a ridiculous like light pattern now when you flick that switch to show when the autonomy's on. Because that's
so unnecessary, but so cool.
So unnecessary, because so what I did is I made the light pattern just because I wanted to try a few more things with the Arduino and just sort of like, you know, get used to interfacing with multiple pins at once and stuff. And just because like I'm not familiar with things like bit shifting and stuff, and it's just an interesting software project to just do patterns in lights. And I sent a picture or a video of that to Ryan. He was like, that needs to be the status light for your autonomous system. So I've done that now. So when you flick a switch, it will have a little light pattern going on a bunch of pink LEDs. So I've got that. I got it as well so that it had like a dead man switch thing. So you could flick the switch on and then hold the rudder to one side to activate it. And it meant that when you let go of the transmitter, it would turn the autonomy thing off again, which I think is overkill. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not in any final project, but it's interesting to know that we can do it. And I figured out how to make it, like I said, interact with other RC components. So I have at various times had like a full electronic prototype of all the electronics that would go into a robot like this, where it's got the drive motors controlled by the transmitter directly and having the weapon thing go through the Arduino so that you can switch between human control and computer control, and like make it so that it can do, you know, the routines for firing it, where it's got to, like with some weapons, it's got like a server that's got to move to position and back again, or if it's a different type of weapon, maybe it spins the motor one way for a certain amount of time and then spins it back the other way. So I've been experimenting with all of that and just getting the hang of and learning just programming for the Arduino as well. It's very different to what I'm used to at work. So that's what I've been messing around with. And I'm very pleased with the results that I've achieved so far. And maybe it will make it into a robot from Spinnerproof one day.
So to be clear, because you either consciously or unconsciously have refused to say the actual words, what you've got working at the moment is potentially a setup for a semi-autonomous weapon on a Beetle.
Yeah.
And that is a sentence that I could not love anymore.
So I've been designing it so far with a flipper in mind, so it is contact with the front of the robot. You mentioned the possibility of doing it with a hammer, which would need a LiDAR, I think, to do.
You could do it contact based.
Yeah, it could, but I think LiDAR would be better, because the other thing that occurred to me that I haven't told you about yet that would be interesting is like adjusting the triggering point in the middle of a fight and using the throttle, because I can read PWM values, right? So you can go the like to have like a plus or minus however many centimeters on the LiDAR before it triggers it, so that you can go when the stick's centered, it fires it at like 10 centimeters. But if you go to full throttle, it will fire it a bit sooner, and then like no throttle, it goes a bit closer to the robot, something like that. So like there are options now that I know how to read PWM signals.
I have a better idea. If you need contact to activate the weapon, what about a robot with whiskers? Not even joking. Not even joking. As a way to make sure that you can hit a spinner before they hit you, I think that is a genuinely workable idea.
Well, you'd have to have something like the whiskers that are quite sturdy, I would have thought, to make them actually actuate a button.
That's for you to sort out. I'm just the ideas guy on this.
This is the thing that I'm struggling with is the mechanics. As usual, it's the mechanics of the outside world. I think I might try and get some like bump micro switches or something that are quite easy to activate, but I don't know a lot about it. I also had like big ambitions for a very complicated circuit that could cut the computer out completely from the equation, so that when you switch back to human control, it's not going through the Arduino. And I think, at least for the first sort of few prototypes of this, I think I'm going to hang back on those ambitions. But I have drawn up schematics that I'm confident would work for that. They're just overkill. Now,
I know this isn't a competition, but I do feel like the stuff you've worked on there contributes a very large amount more to the team than what I've been doing. Although, to be fair, what I've been doing, really, is about building my own skills and confidence. And I guess for you, it's kind of the same in terms of you've basically developed not a new skill set per se, but you've learned to do something you couldn't previously do. It isn't about the prototype, it's about the knowledge.
Yeah, like I'm a lot more confident with electronics now than I was before. Like I know we've sort of like joked that I have half a degree in this kind of stuff, but like I've never been particularly sure. It's been like questions like, can you join the 0-volt rails altogether? And should you do that? And my answer before that has always been, I don't know. But now I feel like, yes, you can join them, and that's what I have been doing. I still don't know whether you should do it or not, but I think you should. So like the 0-volt rail is common across the things. So I've had situations where I've got like, multiple voltage levels and stuff, which I was always a bit more nervous about doing before, but now I'm quite confident doing it and like powering an Arduino in various ways and stuff. So I've gained a lot of knowledge and confidence with the electronics side of stuff. So I think we can be more ambitious with the internals in the future. So things like we've floated the idea of having either multiple batteries at different levels, or like having the idea of having the drive on like 4S and the weapon on 3S, or vice versa, and stuff like that was always like, I'm not sure how that would work. Whereas now I'm still not sure, but I'm a lot more confident that I could make that work and it would be fine. So there's been a lot of sort of a lot of other stuff that's come out of it.
What we've really done is just make future robots slightly more expensive.
Yeah, like an Arduino's another £20 component that goes into it now. Finding the weight for it will be a laugh as well.
I was going to say, how much is it currently weighing, and how sort of battle ready do you think it is as a component?
You'd be shocked to learn that I have never weighed my Arduino.
You are the problem.
I did intentionally buy a small one. Like I bought an Arduino Nano. I was debating between an Arduino Nano and the Arduino Uno. And the Uno is like the big, easy to use one that's got everything and is hard to break. And in the end, I thought, well, I'll buy the small one just so that if we ever do put it in a robot, I've already got one. I think it's comparable in weight to like a speed controller or something. Like it would just be another little thing we've got to get in there.
So it can't be more than like a receiver for the actual Arduino itself.
Well, I think it weighs more than like the Lemon receivers that we've got.
Actually, yeah, they are about 4.5 grams, though, to be fair. They're pretty light.
Yeah, and the Arduino's got a lot more metal on it because it's got however many pins it's got. Whereas so that the all the pins that you interface with on the receiver, the Arduino has many more than that. So there's just a lot more metal in it.
I think the key thing is the space. That's always the struggle.
Yeah. We'll just have to design a robot with it in mind. That's the thing. And this is, running many more wires. The way that I've done the ridiculous light array is is a lot of wires and a lot of resistors that need to go in there. I think there are better ways to do it. I think we could probably you can buy like addressable LED strips, and I think we should probably use that instead, because I think you can just communicate with that over like a single wire or something. So there are better ways to achieve the things that have been achieved, I suspect.
When we started this team off, I think we had pretty disparate skill sets. I think between us, we were one roboteer. In terms of, I was happy to go away and obsess over a design. You were happy to stand there and build it and do the electronics. That was kind of how we divided our labour to begin with. Whereas now, I think we both, as I've said before, I think we both have the skills to do it on our own. And it's now a question of following the sort of interest we each have and the speciality we each have in terms of our knowledge to be the most effective team possible. So I think we're bringing the same stuff, just in different amounts. So it would be really dumb of us to build a robot where I do all the soldering, or where I work out the whole internal layout. So that's clearly still your area. But we're now at a point where I think if we went to a competition, I wouldn't be stood there looking in the robot not knowing what everything does, which is where I was at Bogglebots. I could name the individual bits, but I couldn't tell you how they all went together.
You say that now, but if you make me put this autonomy system in there, you might find yourself back in that situation.
You know what, even then, I think I have enough of an understanding of how things go together that I would be able to kind of comprehend the place of that new hardware within the system.
Actually, I think the thing is, the important thing is that if you were on your own and the Arduino broke, you absolutely know enough stuff to take the Arduino out and build something else in there that works.
I know enough to like bypass and diffuse it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think that the big thing for me from having done the work I've done is that I now feel that I can contribute more in the areas where I've just left things to you, which I feel really good about.
Gonna eat into my responsibility. You're gonna just like get to the point where you don't need me anymore.
That's why we need to add autonomy. You've got to have something that means you're worthwhile.
I'm just going to keep increasing the complexity of electronics. Every time you make an advancement in your understanding of it, I'm going to add something else to it.
If we start going brushless, then you'll be able to knock me back down a peg or two.
I would like to do that still. I keep going backwards and forwards of thinking, brushes is fine. We don't need it. Like, if we're fine with the brushed stuff. But then I think, but like, think of the space savings above all else of having brushless motors.
I mean, when it comes to doing your move, I think we need to set ourselves the goal of brushless weapon. Let's just get ourselves over that hump.
Yeah. Brushless LiDAR-controlled weapon.
Beetleweight chomp incoming.
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/77. And there you can find links to all the stuff we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your lockdown projects.